This video is a recording of the NDS Association webinar held on February 4th, 2021 about the advantages of using NDS.Live for intelligent speed assistance.
Good morning, good afternoon, and hello and welcome to the NDS Association webinar. Today, we will talk about the advantages of using NDS.Live for intelligent speed assistance. This webinar will be recorded and the video will be shared on the NDS Association YouTube channel. Once available, we will make a post on LinkedIn and on our NDS website at NDS-Association.org. This is the first of 4 webinars on February 25th. We will deep dive even more than today into NDS.Live and the technical concepts. On March 11th, we will talk about how to reduce data consumption in connected cars by using NDS.Live, and on March 25th, it's all about layering map data by freshness and use cases and delivering them in a smart way to cloud systems and vehicles with NDS.Live. Please join us again on these dates. With me today is Nico Glorious, Product Manager, Data Delivery Services at NavInfo Europe. Nico is also Vice President of the NDS Association. And my name is Philip Hubertus, and I'm a Senior Product Manager at HERE for automotive products and MIP applications. We're both engaging in the NDS Association because we believe in the advantages of NDS as the worldwide standard for map data in automotive ecosystems. That said, today we will talk about NDS.Live, the evolution of NDS for connected vehicles and cloud applications, and we will not talk about what NavInfo and HERE have to offer in this space. I hope you're sitting comfortably with a coffee or a morning drink in hand, and we're going to start. So here's an overview of what we will cover today. First, I will share what ISA, the upcoming Intelligent Speed Assistance regulation, is and why it needs map data. And then I will hand over to Nico, who will share the basics of what NDS.Live is and how it's a solution for ISA for connected cars and its other advantages. And then we have reserved time for your questions. You can ask them anytime in the Q&A box, and we will read and answer them during the Q&A and with a panel of experts. So let's start looking at intelligent speed assistance. The European Commission's Trade Council has set up a road safety group, and they defined the goal Vision Zero, which aims to reduce road deaths to almost zero by 2050. ISA is defined as a mandatory in-vehicle system that shall support drivers with complying with the speed limits everywhere on any European road. It's a term used for various possible implementations. An open ISA will warn drivers using visible and or audible alerts and the speed limit when the speed limit is being exceeded. Drivers then decide themselves whether or not to slow down. It's an informative or advisory system only. A half-open ISA provides additional haptic feedback by increasing the pressure needed on the accelerator pedal when the speed limit is exceeded. Driving at higher than allowed speed is possible, but less comfortable because of the counter pressure of the accelerator pedal. And then there's a closed ISA, which actively limits the vehicle's speed to the speed limit, and it can also be overridden by pushing down the accelerator pedal very hard. In all 3 implementations, it may still be possible for the driver to choose to switch the system on or off. Definite ISA test requirements and timelines are still being finalized by the European Commission, but what's already apparent is that ISA will become mandatory in all passenger cars, light commercial vehicles, trucks, and buses. There's a 2-stage rollout of the European Union ISA regulation. The first stage starts in July 2022, when new vehicle types require ISA. These are new models launched in Europe that require type approval. And the second stage launches in July 2024. Then all new vehicles sold within the European Union must include ISA as a standard line fit. As I said, the European Commission is still finalizing the new ISA requirements and test approval criteria. But according to the latest version, the following types of speed limits are in scope. Explicit speed limits that are signposted, as well as variable speed limits often found on displays across motorways. And then there are the implicit speed limits. These are general country or regional speed limit regulations general non-posted speed limits for highways and motorways, for city and build-up areas, and speed limits in traffic calming zones, for example, the residential playing streets and living streets. Now, the European Union regulation does not only come with recommendations and requirements, that's why it's called a regulation. So OEMs will have to pass tests to get approval for their solution. And as a direct result, approval to sell vehicles in the European Union market. The approval requirement is a 90% target to correctly apply the speed limit to the solution. And we understand this will be tested during test drives before a vehicle start of production, and tests will be repeated during the vehicle production time. There are defined conditions for these test drives, and you can read a summary on the slide. I'm not going into the details here as the regulation is not entirely final yet. Now, how does intelligent speed assistance look like to a driver? I took these pictures of the cluster of my car. That gives you an idea on how this can be implemented. So I'm going from the top left to the bottom right. In the first picture, you can see the current speed limit displayed. Next to that, you can also see the upcoming speed limit. That's with a white circle around it. This information is provided by the vehicle electronic horizon because the actual speed limit is much further away than the camera-based system would be able to see. Picture 3 on the top right shows that the distance of the upcoming speed limit is displayed and counted down as you get closer to the new speed limit. And I personally like this a lot because it allows me to coast into lower speed limits consuming less gas and no need to brake, or when a speed limit is lifted, it's also displayed. And then I can prepare for going a little faster. In the next row down on picture 4, you can see a green status icon that is highlighting and indicating that the limiting function is switched on, and picture 5 shows an indicator in the speedometer of what the limit is set to. This means when enabled and set to a speed limit, my car allows me to accelerate up to the speed limit, but not faster, unless I press hard on the accelerator pedal. Then the car will go over the speed limit and the green status light will start blinking. And this is me in my car ignoring my ISA feature on December 27th. I have to thank the Traffic Enforcement Department of the city of Bad Homburg for reminding me that going over the speed is not okay, and ignoring a nice feature like ISA should not happen. It's there to protect lives. And in case you wonder, the white square is added by the Traffic Enforcement Department. It's really no reason for me to hide my wife and kids, but they were traveling with me at the time. So now that we've talked about the ISA regulation and we've seen an example of how this looks like to drivers, let's talk about why map data is required for ISA solutions. Speed limits that are signposted can be detected by camera-based systems, but it's not always easy. On this slide, you can see some typical challenging situations that camera systems are facing. Speed limits are not or badly visible. Bad weather or light conditions are challenging, and it can be as simple as foliage growth, overhanging speed limits, snow covering signs, or simply the lack of infrastructure maintenance. The smaller additional and conditional signs can also be hard to read. In the upper right corner, you see such an example. Such conditional speed limits can be time-based, they can be for trucks only or for certain trucks only, and they can be weather dependent. And then we have a whole other category of speed limits, the implicit ones that are not signposted. These are, for example, default country level speed limits for motorways, urban roads, built-up areas, living or play streets. And these non-posted speed limits can also be conditional. For example, speed limits may depend on whether a road is paved or not, or they can be weather dependent. In France, for example, the speed limit on motorways when it rains is 110 kilometers instead of 130. And then also note, please, that in Europe, it's very easy and sometimes seamless to cross country borders without border checkpoints and with very limited signage. But when speed limit rules do change based on country level requirements, then you have to apply that, right? The non-posted implicit speed limits are very common, as you can see in this graphic, based on research data by here. In the northern European countries, you find a high density of posted speed limits, but in the middle and south of Europe, the posted speed limits become less dense. And in summary, ISA system will not work well enough when they are relying on camera-only systems. Map data provides real value as the source for speed limits when signs are not present, or as a reference and kind of second sensor to validate detected speed limits. And you don't just need map data. We believe you need this data to be regularly updated because speed limits do change at an average rate of 10% per year across Europe. Obviously, speed limits of roads change when there are short and midterm speed limits, like the ones displayed on variable road signs, and speed limits related to construction zones. But countrywide regulations can also change, like they did in France in 2019 or just recently in the Netherlands. So not only do you want map data in support of ISA, you also want up-to-date map data, and you want a great user experience. And you see, I'm a bit selfish here. When I go visit my parents, I want to spend quality time with them. I already have to fix their phones and their laptops, and I just don't want to also update the map in the car because it's complicated. So let's be honest, how comfortable ISA and map updates for ISA depends on the cost of the solution and budget of bill of material. Basically, solutions will fall into two very simplified camps. On one side, we have low-cost vehicles, especially those that have a life cycle that spans into 2024 when ISA becomes mandatory. And for these, we believe you will see a non-connected solution with a static onboard map covering all Europe or large update regions and manual updates of the map. Some OEMs, we believe, will leverage existing navigation solutions and simply bring them into all terminals. On the other side, we have newer generation and mid to premium level vehicles where the vehicle connectivity is used to bring fresh map data into the car and share vehicle sensor data as well. For cost reasons, these solutions will only want to consume the data they really need. Therefore, the solution should determine a home zone where the vehicle is regularly driven and keep that zone up to date. When leaving the zone, it will prefetch, stream, and cache the needed additional map data. And that is exactly where NDS.Live based solutions will provide a lot of benefits. And Nico will explain this more in detail. But before I hand over to Nico, allow me to briefly mention this white paper published by Continental, Electrobit and here, which provides more details on the ISA regulation and challenges. And you can download it by pointing your browser to NDS.to/ISA-WP. And now I hand over to Nico.
Yeah, thank you, Philip, for introducing us to the Intelligent Speed Assistant and the regulations and challenges that come with this system. Before I talk to you about NDS.Live itself and how we can help you solve these challenges, I'd like to tell you a little bit about where NDS is coming from and why we think that we can help you to solve the ISA challenges. So NDS stands for Navigation Data Standard, and the NDS is an association which has to go to create a worldwide interoperable standard for map data and automotive ecosystems. So worldwide here not just means a worldwide usage and distribution, but also that we want to make sure that special market requirements are taken into account, like address systems, special toll regulations, or other regulations regarding how the map needs to look like, needs to be displayed, and so on. Yeah, interoperable here means that a customer should have the possibility to choose from various providers which fits their needs best. And for example, take map provider A for North America, map provider B for China, map provider C for Japan, and combine this with NavCo provider D, and that all should work together with a little integration effort. Should even be possible to exchange suppliers during runtime or during project lifetime, things like that. And all that has been proven to work already. So the association itself has been founded in 2008 by OEMs, application providers, service providers, map data and compilation providers, and they all brought in their experts, their knowledge, their IP, but also their requirements and their roadmaps to form a standard that fulfill this goal mentioned above. First products saw the light of the day in 2012. And since then, we see a growing number of users and commercial projects using NDS in ADAS and infotainment systems. And Philip, maybe you can switch the slides. Thank you. And yeah, as you can see here, we have many members, amongst them big OEMs like BMW, Daimler, FCA, Hyundai, Mitsubishi, Nissan, Renault. We have the Toyota Research Institute, we have Volkswagen, and they all are using NDS in their infotainment systems and their ADAS applications. And even in smartphone applications, NDS is used nowadays, and all that in commercial projects. So yeah, where is NDS coming from, and why do we think that NDS.Live can help you to solve the ISA challenges and also other challenges we are currently facing? So NDS started by standardizing the NDS format, which was called NDS back then, but now with the development of NDS.Live, it was renamed to NDS Classic. And that format has been, or is still, a physical data format based on SQLite, focusing on infotainment use cases and ADAS use cases. But during the last years, we also added the support for autonomous driving by adding data for HD maps like lanes, positioning, localization objects, map confidence attributes, and stuff like that. And yeah, with ADAS use cases and autonomous driving, we are seeing on the one hand more data coming in. So HD maps are obviously much bigger than SD data. And on the other hand, we also see the need for higher freshness of the data, which Philip already explained. And therefore, we saw that this physical storage format, which was tailor-made for in-car storage, so it was size optimized, doesn't fit anymore. And therefore, we started the development of NDS.Live as a distributed map data system to enable streaming use cases, more flexible configurations, and so on. For example, in NDS Classic, as I said, we focused on optimizing for size. So if you had a long link which stretches over multiple tiles, the attributes of this link have been stored in one tile only. And if you have been in another tile, you had to load the tile where the attributes are stored in order to have all the information about this link. This is fine for storage in the car, but for streaming, this is obviously not the best solution, because you're then getting avalanche effects here. You need to load additional tiles and so on. So this needs to be avoided, and therefore we also made sure that the data is more self-contained than it has been in NDS.Live. So, but we didn't start from scratch, but we based NDS.Live on the successful and proven concepts of NDS Classic, not just to make migration easy, but also from maturity reasons, because we optimized NDS Classic for the last years with all the feedbacks we received from the members. And also to combine NDS Classic with NDS.Live, one during the migration phase, but also to support hybrid use cases where you want to still store some data in the car and others you want to get via online services. And we will have an additional webinar on this topic later in this series as well. So NDS.Live is not a database anymore. NDS.Live is a distributed map data system, meaning it doesn't matter anymore where the database itself is stored. So it can be stored in the cloud. You can have a cache in the car. You can have the entire database in the car. The data can even be distributed and can be retrieved from different services. All of this is possible with NDS.Live. And next to this distributed feature, we also wanted to give NDS.Live better flexibility. So in NDS Classic, we had quite well-defined layers in the format. So we had a routing layer, an ADAS layer, guidance, truck name layers. All of these have been well-defined. So we had definitions which attributes should end up in which layer, which is good for interoperability. But this limits your flexibility. So, for example, the speed limit was meant to be stored in guidance. And if you want, for whatever reason, to use speed limit in routing, there was no way to store this in the routing layer. So you had to load both layers in order to get the speed limit. And speaking of loading all data, you also had to load the entire guidance layer if you want to have the speed limit only, even if you're not interested in guidance attributes like, I don't know, bridge, tunnel, highway, and so on. And for onboard systems, this is not a big of an issue, but for streaming, this is something you should avoid. And this is something we did by introducing data layers, which can be configured according to your need, and then combining these data layers into containers. For example, we have tiles, which are tailor-made for storing in a cache. For example, we have paths, which are paths with attributes attached, which are more fit for routing or for e-horizon applications. And we also have single objects, for example, parking garage, which can be loaded separately. So that was basically already this slide. So could you please already show the next one? Thank you, Philip. So I told you now about the features of NDS.Live, but now I also want to tell you a little bit about the benefits and what you can do with it. What I want to show you here is that you could basically build one platform for your entire car line based on one interface, on one specification, sharing data amongst all these cars and all these systems with different needs. So you could have cars which currently don't have any infotainment or ADAS functionality today, but which need to be equipped with ISA systems soon. And they could be served with a road network and a simple speed limit layer on top of that. And then you could have cars with ADAS functionality, which need additional data like curvature and slope. And then you will serve road network, speed limit layer, and the ADAS layer packed together in one package. And then you may have infotainment systems which need map data for display purposes. And last but not least, you may have cars which drive autonomously to a certain degree, and they will need additional data. So they will need HD data like lane geometry and positioning objects and so on. And they will get an HD layer on top of that. So as you can see here, these can be provided all by one server infrastructure, by one service, where you're storing all these layers, and these layers are shared between all these cars and systems with different needs. And only the data which is really required is packaged together and served to the cars. So as you can see here on the lower side, car with ISA only will only get the route network and the ISA layer or speed limit layer. So we are minimizing the payload which is needed to be transported, and really tailor-made it to the needs of the individual systems. And this also limits the effort for validation of the data. So this data is all shared amongst all these systems, so there's no need to have one map for the smaller cars with an ISA system only, one map for the ADAS-equipped cars, and another map for the cars with HD functionality. All can be served out of one map with different layers, and then this map can be validated once only, for example. So these are not just ideas which I presented to you. So we have the specification ready. It's updated regularly with the feedback from the members, especially from the joint development team, which is formed by a couple of members which are actively implementing first services and clients now to test the specification, to test interoperability, and to get first systems and services up and running. We also have tools available already from NDS to connect to these services, to visualize and query the data. We are starting with the certification right now to be able to not only test your data, but also to get a certificate to your data, proving that your services are NDS.Live compliant. And we also have sample data already available as NDS islands. So I'd like to invite you to join us and make advantage of the standards and solution we are offering. And with that, I'd like to hand over to Philippe to start the Q&A and panel discussion.
Yeah, thank you, Nico. So we're now going into the interactive part of our webinar. And if you have questions, please submit them in the Q&A window. Your questions will then be answered by our panel of experts. So please welcome our panelists, Martin Schleicher, Head of Software Strategy at Continental, and also Chairman of the NDS Association. Nico Glorious, Product Manager at Navinfo, and also Vice Chairman of the NDS Association. Markus Kerper, Navigation, Content, and Operations at Volkswagen Group's Car Software Organization. Fabian Klebert, our Technical Coordinator for the NDS Association. Martin Pfeifle, who's the CTO at NNG, and myself, Finn Hubertus, Product Manager at HERE Technologies. Good, so let's see, and I think we have a first question here already. And someone has asking, how large is a whole Europe map going to be in NDS.Live? It's an interesting question. I get that quite a few times as well. So how big is it going to be? Is it actually, do you actually need a whole map of Europe? I would even ask. Who wants to take it?
Yeah, then maybe I start. So yeah, that's indeed a good question. As Philip, as you said, we are getting this question quite a lot. But to me, I think this is not the real question. Huh? So with NDS.Live, the idea is not to store an entire Europe map anymore in the car, because as I said, we need more freshness. And there's also need for more data, more HD data, and this is getting bigger, and you don't want to store a complete Europe database with HD data in the car, and need to update this complete Europe database on a quite regular basis. So I think the way to go, and especially here for ISA, which we are talking about, is to look into streaming and only stream the data which is needed. And yeah, comparing NDS Classic tiles and NDS.Live tiles might not be fair, because as I said, NDS Classic was really optimized for size and for storage, and we need to change this to have more self-contained tiles. So there is some duplication now. But the real question is, how much data do I need to stream or how much data do I need to download and cache in order to have a proper home zone, to have a proper driving corridor, and so on. So I think this is the question we need to answer.
Yeah, thanks, Nico. There's a few more here that go into the same direction. One is there a cost-friendly recommendation to update the map database? And I think you've touched on this already a little bit with the home zone and downloading only the tiles you need. And here we've done a quick calculation and an analysis based on our first data sets that we produced for ISA. It's interesting because it depends highly on where a car would be driven, right? So in dense urban areas, for example, tiles would be larger. We found out that there's a small city in Sicily which has the densest lane data in all of Europe, which is interesting. Basically, if you have a vehicle that's driven around the Paris region every day, then I think the recommendation is that you cache that into a home zone and only update the data that really needs updating, which may be a monthly cadence for the road network data, a monthly cadence for the posted speed limits, and then depending on the vehicle type, whether it's more in the premium segment, you can choose to then download an additional fresh feed of speed limits data or even a live feed to cover the variable speed limits. The recommendation, I think, is depending on the user experience and the cost and the value and how premium the vehicle experience needs to be. Tiles are around a few kilobytes. We've calculated an average of a few megabytes per month that would be downloadable. But it depends on the client implementation, on how big your home zone is, how much streaming you really do.
Philip, maybe to add something on that one, it basically depends on the solution you're going to implement, right? I mean, you said that already. Is it an ISA only solution you're building? Then it might be limited in data volume or bandwidth used. But if you think of like a full navigation system, this might look already different. And yeah, this is the decision which needs to be made, because I don't think that the premium cars will come with an ISA only solution. They will always come with many more features on top of it, and ISA is just a little part of it. So yeah, this is the main point we have to think about. And of course, then online versus offline is a big decision you have to do, because that also influences the quality of the function at the end. Because from the regulations point of view, you can do updating the map via an USB stick. That's totally fine. But of course, this influences your application because the customer needs to do it via USB stick. And if it's not done, then your map is maybe outdated. It's 3 years old or 5 years old. And then the ISA feature will, with the 10% changes of the speed limits, will be really bad after some time. And I don't know if that the customer then really is going to take, or he will definitely complain.
Yeah, Markus, in the preparation, we talked a little bit about subscription models that are coming up, and you saw the slides that Nico showed with the different levels from basic ISA up to automated driving. What are your thoughts on this on the Volkswagen side? You have a really nice navigation system now on the new platform that also offers lane level guidance and positioning. And are you thinking about offering a base ISA only, and then consumers can subscribe to additional services and maybe even premium navigation features individually? Because NDS.Live would be something where you could stack layers down on top of each other depending on what the consumer chooses to select, right?
Yeah. So that's exactly where we are right now, because we are surfing like the low budget cars out there up to premium cars. And of course, one goal is to have one solution at the end, because that will save costs at the end. But always the question, is that possible? What we currently have is systems that don't have a navigation at all. It's really a radio still. And then we have systems where you can activate your navigation functionality afterwards. So we call that a ready for navigation system. And basically the navigation is already built in, and it can be used already. And it can also already in the background serve the ISA feature without any problem, because the database is already there. The functionality is basically there, but it's not available. And then of course we have the navigation systems. And the navigation systems, there is ISA, it's just the side product of the complete feature set. And for us, mainly right now, the question is how to get also the lower budget systems ready for ISA. And that's basically one point where we also think of all the possibilities we have there, and of course also costs which come with that. Because sometimes the systems, the low budget systems, are not even online. And who's going to pay for that? And then, of course, we have the overseas countries. So this is not a regulation for Europe, but also for the overseas countries. And it might be that we are not even online in such countries. And I mean, I also heard about Israel. They are thinking of adapting the regulations. This is also not part of our usual European map database right now. So there are many points where we are really trying to find the best solution. And of course, NDS.Live could be one of the solutions there.
Yeah, thank you, Markus. And for those who are not really aware of what the overseas countries are, these are small islands in the Caribbean that are part of Europe, because they're part of France and the Netherlands. For example, and yeah, they're really remote, or the Portuguese islands as well, like Madeira. Here's a question that may be interesting and answerable by Martin Pfeifler, because I know you have a streaming service on NDS already. Question here is from Martin Steuer, who asks, is it possible to update only parts of tiles because the road network changes not so often? Or is the idea to then package data differently depending on required update cycles?
Well, I mean, thanks, Philip, for passing that question to me. But maybe I explain a little bit the interest of NNG in general on this activity here. And as you mentioned, we are in this association very active, and my colleague Otto Nairo, he showed at the NDS Open Day all the streaming capabilities we did together with NavInfo, where we download NDS.Live tiles and use them in our navigation system, and match them then to traditional maps, and had quite a flexible setup where we have a base map and then NDS.Live tiles. For us, and I come back to the question, but I probably also pass the technical details to Fabian then. And he's smiling already. But let me mention also, why NDS.Live is interesting for us in this ISA use case. So NNG is probably a navigation provider, but we are also looking into whole ADAS and ADASIS topics and these e-horizon topics, and the whole ISA idea of downloading smart layers to the car, where we then can use them and distribute them in the car, is very closely related to the e-horizon concept we are implementing. But we are also, and I'm very interested in the other concepts of NDS.Live, which is more in the smart path layer, which would open up a complete new field later on. I don't think we touch on this in this webinar, but probably in later on webinars where we might get even to online e-horizon solutions based on NDS.Live. And obviously all the certification topics, which we also discussed briefly, is very interesting, as we are maintaining the validation suite and certification bench for the NDS consortium. So back to the question, I mean, what is a little bit unclear to me, and I think it's still up for debate, is this NDS smart layer tiles. whether they are pre-compiled on the server by the data providers, and then you basically serve a certain combination of links and lanes and attributes, or whether you are even up to combine them on the fly. So I think that's my understanding, but maybe Fabian can correct me, or he nodded. It's up to the service provider. So he can then decide whether he can mix them and then deliver them as a package, or whether he has pre-compiled them. And this is obviously then also a discussion which goes into latency questions and and flexibility questions. And I think, to my understanding, this is not standardized, but the delivery channel and the request channels are standardized, but not the way how you implement the service. But yeah, I think there is also room for development and for differentiation and for coming up with the best solution.
Yeah, right. So to take this over from what you said, Martin. So you're completely right. Actually, we're defining the service interface. We don't exactly tell you how you need to implement the service. So if somebody does that on the fly, real time or whatever, that's the thing. So what we've seen in Nico's slides, basically the smart layer approach, that goes for all kind of lifetime of data, right? So that is applicable for static data, which is versioned. So versioned data, like we talked about, for dynamic data, and for live data. It all comes through the same kind of, it comes in the same stack, more or less, right? It's the same kind of concept of these stacked layers. And to answer the specific question, you can only update parts of tiles because you only update the layers of the tiles, right? But then you ship that tile again, and you still have the ability to ship delta updates to keep them small, and so on and so forth. And having said that, there are a lot of technical questions at the moment already. And I would like to encourage everyone to join the other webinars where we will go in depth into all these topics, where we can then also, of course, rediscuss and more deeply discuss these questions than in the starting panel that we have here. So maybe today it's also good to focus on the more, I mean, we have so many questions. Thanks for that. That's really great. And that's why I would say, for all the technical stuff, please join our upcoming webinars again. And I promise we'll go through all of them then. Maybe not all of them explicitly, but most of them that I've seen there will be answered anyhow. Well, you see, there's more details. So there was one interesting questions that I would like to take up is that what about how do we get access to NDS.Live? So Philip, maybe you can quickly say a word on that. So in terms of how can people get access?
Yeah, so what we're offering is you can get in touch with us. We'll be able to provide evaluation licenses for NDS.Live. I think the different data providers organized in the NDS Association are happy to work with you on this. There's also a question on the Chinese market from Liang Wang. What's the business of NDS in China? And I think Nico Glorious of Enough Info can answer that. But before you do, Nico, quickly, I'm going to show a slide at the end of this with a contact of Markus Juncker, our NDS administrator. So if you're interested in an evaluation, then please get in touch with Markus.
Yeah, I just can confirm what Philip just said. Please contact me. My address is on the NDS webpage at the very bottom.
So yeah,
China.
Regarding China, yeah, thank you, Philip. So indeed, we have quite a number of Chinese member companies here. Out of my head, we have Autonavi, Baidu, we have Enough Info, of course, we have Tencent, we have Quading. So we have quite a number of big players as member here, and most of them are already providing the services based on NDS and are using NDS products. So yes, NDS is also used in China, maybe not to such a degree as here in Europe, I would say, but it's already a big player there.
Yeah. Yeah, go on.
I would like to continue because I saw a couple of similar questions coming in regarding data sources and reliability of NDS maps. So maybe we should clarify a little bit on that, because so NDS itself is only a standard. So it's only defining the format or the interfaces. So we are not a service or map provider as NDS. So we have map providers as members which are providing services based on NDS. And yeah, you need to contact these in order to get map data or products.
Sure, but why we're already talking, I mean, we've seen a couple of questions on functional safety, for instance. And we have in our panel, we have people that you guys deal with that on an everyday basis somehow. So maybe let's bring in Martin Schleicher from Continental, asking, so functional safety and ISA, is that different to functional safety and ADAS systems, or is that, or how are you dealing with that in that?
Thanks. Yeah, thanks. Functional safety, so the ASIL applies for software inside, or for systems inside the vehicle. So the software and also the system dealing with maps or with ISA that runs in the vehicle is applicable to the famous ISO 26262 standard. So when it comes to maps or processing, compiling maps, downloading maps to the vehicle, this part is not covered by ASIL and hence needs other standards. So while in NDS, we have been working to make NDS.Live, the serial part, compliant to meet the requirements of ISO 26262. We need things, and we have worked in with other consortium about creating concepts like map backend integrity levels that make sure that during the whole process of compiling maps or even creating maps out of sensor data, that is done in a way that the data is correct. But this is outside the scope of NDS to create the standards. But we have the concepts thought through, and we can share the information. We have some white papers and presentations available. So Markus, you can also distribute the links then after the webinar.
Okay, thanks. There's another one, interesting question on the potential business model for map providers. So Moritz is asking, will they offer ready-to-use service offering the NDS.Live services with their own map data to the OEM, or will OEM still host their own services? So maybe that's an interesting question also to Markus from Volkswagen. Is that, so are you, or what are your plans? Or is this going to change things? Are you still running your own services? Are you combining things? Will this change the landscape, or maybe enhance it, or what's your ideas there?
So yeah, maybe I can take that question first. I don't know if that will dramatically change with NDS.Live, to be honest, because there is not the one defined NDS.Live service for all the features, right? And we still have to put our requirements somewhere together and then get the service built in a way that we would like to use it. And of course, every OEM is free to select the map providers and the suppliers of the system at the end. Of course, one option would be that we host the system ourselves, but we don't have map data right now. As the OEM, this is still with the map providers. So that has to be a business model altogether, I would say.
So Philip, you agree on this? Or?
Yeah, I mean, NDS.Live offers multiple ways of doing this. And from a map provider point of view, we cater to this in multiple different ways. So we will set up NDS.Live map services, and it's then really up to the implementation of how they are consumed. These can go, for example, from our HERE platform directly down to vehicles, but they could also go to a cloud service on the OEM or the system vendor side first, acting as a proxy. So NDS.Live supports both of that. It supports direct to vehicle streaming, but it also supports cloud-to-cloud streaming. And then from a final cloud down to the vehicle. However you want to do it, we will provide, and I think every map provider provide a set of smart layers for the different use cases. And if you have customized needs, NDS.Live enables it fairly easily to combine data layers into a customized smart layer. So if you have a specific requirement that applies to your specific vehicle in some way, or you have an idea of how you want to solve something a little differently, that is still possible. And such a customized data layer can then be combined into a smart layer that would then be available for you only. So it's an advantage to us as well as a map data provider and allows more flexibility.
So I think it's important to note, as you already said, that the NDS.Live service interfaces, they work B2C as well as B2B, right? Yeah. Good. Let's see, what else do we have? We have a lot of interesting questions here.
Yeah, there's a lot of them around data size still. So I've just looked up our analysis and I want to give you a bit of indication. So first, the size of a tile obviously depends on the use case. So we've looked at ISA versus full ADAS, and from the attributes that we include, an ISA only tile is about half the size of a tile for full ADAS in our configuration of attributes. This can be different from map data provider to map data provider. So now to talk specifics, our first analysis has shown that a single tile in a dense urban area is about 14 kilobytes uncompressed. And in a more rural area, it's about 4 to 5 kilobyte uncompressed. So a single tile doesn't really help you because you always need more than one. So what we did is we did a fairly, with a lot of assumptions, we did a calculation, 25,000 kilometers driven annually, 45 kilometers around your home location of the vehicle where it's parked at night, translating into roughly 320 tiles that need to be downloaded and updated every month. If you do a monthly update cadence for a fairly simple system, 60% of driving happens maybe outside of that home zone as you are, going for weekend trips or further than the 45 kilometers. That would mean about a 10 megabyte initial download for a full ADAS set, 2 to 5 megabyte for ISA only, 50 to 150 megabyte of continuous downloading then per month after that initial one for full ADAS again, and about 10 to 50 for ISA only. It really depends on where the vehicle is driven. If you are more in a suburban area and you also work in suburban areas, then it may be less. If you're in a very dense urban area, like a big metro area, Paris, or here in Germany, the Ruhrgebiet or other dense urban areas, then it will obviously be more, simply because there's more data to consume.
Also, the drive pattern might be different. For example, taking the Ruhrgebiet, if there are many highways and there are traffic jams all over it, so you're taking different routes every day, although you're having the same start and destination point and stuff like that. One question on top of that, Philip. So if you're talking about different configurations and your attribute set, you're talking about that you're not just need the speed limit attribute to support this use case, but in order to do correct map matching, you also need additional attributes like whether it's a highway or not, whether it's a ramp, whether the ramp is going up and down, the driving direction of this link and all that stuff, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And for example, we also recommend to include truck level speed limits, even if it's just a passenger car application, because the camera may detect a truck-specific speed limit, but it may not be able to well detect this smaller conditional sign. If you know about these additional truck speed limits, then you can process that in the vehicle and make sure it doesn't break you down to a speed limit that only applies to trucks. So it's one example of where consuming a little more data can actually help with providing a great user experience.
Okay, thanks for answering that. So I think we're more or less, we went through a lot of questions. We have still more to come, so we'll try to answer them later on, still in the maybe in the chat or so, or trying to think I'm sorry that we cannot answer all of them. There was maybe one interesting aspect before we finish up here, that Martin, so in contrast to bridge to the next webinars a little, because Martin Pfeifler from NNG mentioned the Smart Layer Path services early on, and Philip, now you talked about tile content, right? And we talked about different driving patterns and stuff. So it also will be interesting to see how this newly path-based approach that NDS.Live brings to NDS.Live to NDS map data will work out, because there you can even strip it down to really paths that you travel. So basically something like you're similar to your e-horizon or something like that. So then you can even if you go through high dense city areas, but you always go only on a motorway, you only have to download into the car the speed limits from the motorway, because this is where you're always going, and you don't care about all the side streets that would be included in a tile only approach. So this is also an enhancement or an improvement or evolution that NDS.Live brings over NDS Classic. And this is a topic we will be covering in one of the next webinars, and see how we can even reduce bandwidth that we need to transmit to the cars with regards to that.
Good. Let me mention one point here, Fabian, as well. Sorry. It's also interesting for application providers NDS.Live. Then, not only that we consume the data from Navinfo or from here and so on, but it opens up opportunities for companies like NNG, like Electrowood, for whomever who offers applications, that NDS.Live is then a channel through which we can provide cool new features, be it in the ISA area, be it in the electric vehicle area, be it in whatever area. And so our interest is really twofold: to consume data conveniently from the map providers and to offer cool services then. And we hope that NDS.Live helps us here.
Yeah, Martin, there's actually a question around this from from Hyundai MNsoft, who asked, is there a chance that ISA could be implemented jointly with ADAS data? And I think you've alluded to that a little. And again, with NDS.Live, you can stack data on top of each other, and then on the system vendor side, they would also have a stack of different features that they can offer and build upon. And and like Markus said, maybe on the OEM side, there's interest to allow these to be subscribed to. So you line fit the whole stack, but it's up to the consumer or maybe the dealer to unlock these features depending on the consumer selection and willingness to pay for these additional premium features. Good, I think we've run past the hour. There is still more questions here. We're going to take some of these and answer them in our post on the NDS website that we're using to then also share the slides and the video. I want to quickly share my screen again here so that you can actually see that quickly and note it down. So this was our panel. We advance the slide here. So here's again Markus Junker's email address, where you can request an evaluation license. There were some questions around whether there are services available and data sets. Yes. So we have actually developed what we call the NDS Island, a data set that we can share, which is completely map data provider independent. It can be used for development purposes. So you can do your own little test drive there with our data. I want to again quickly advise you to and recommend that you join us in the upcoming webinars. Again, more of a deep dive on NDS.Live on February 25th. We're going to speak more about reducing bandwidth with NDS.Live for ISA use cases on March 11th. And then on March 25th, it's all about how we deliver data the smart way with NDS.Live. Stay up to date. Visit our website at NDS-Association.org for more information, for a recording of this video you can share with your colleagues and peers, and also for some more questions that we'll answer as part of that posting. Thank you very much, all the panelists and all the attendees today. Looking forward to seeing you again in our next session. And with that, thank you. I'd like to close for the day.
Thank you for watching. Visit our website for news on NDS at nds-association.org.